Have you ever held an old photograph in your hand and wondered how many secrets lie behind that motionless smile? In tonight's story, we will follow the trail of a 1925 photograph, seemingly just a simple family portrait, but gradually it opens up a maze of memories spanning nearly a century. Lines hidden in a strange light, a mysterious code, and names that have disappeared from official records, all seem to be waiting to be found to tell a hidden story. We will join Emily and Sarah on a journey of discovery, from dusty government filing cabinets to small cemeteries where memories sleep, and then the vast fields of Montana, where a brother, a mother, and a secret have lain dormant for decades. Before we begin, let me ask you a gentle question. Where are you reading this story from and what time is it? If this is your first visit to Sleepy History Tales, please subscribe so you don't miss out on more historical mysteries told in the gentlest way. A mother and her son in a photograph taken in 1925. It sounds like just an ordinary family keepsake. But when experts analyzed the photo, they were speechless, unable to find an explanation. On a quiet afternoon at the Smithsonian American History Museum, Dr. Sarah Mitchell gently pushed her glasses up her eyes tensely, following each item in the newly donated collection. Among the dusty boxes filled with documents and memorabilia of the Henderson family in Chicago, there was a black and white photo that made her pause for a long time. The photo, dated 1925, shows a woman in her 30s, dressed elegantly, standing next to a boy of about 12. They pose solemnly on the porch of a modest brown brick house in Chicago. At first glance, it was a typical family portrait. But Sarah quickly realized something was wrong. Just behind the mother's left shoulder in the window frame, a shadowy figure appeared. Something completely out of place. Sarah's heart fluttered. She reached for the magnifying glass, her eyes fixed on the strange detail. The strange thing was that the photograph was too sharp for the technique used in 1925. When the light focused, she realized the boy's hand was placed deliberately covering the coat as if to hide something. "It can't be," Sarah whispered, her breath caught. The seemingly harmless photo suddenly opened up clues that could turn the entire history of this family. With trembling hands, Sarah placed the photo under the museum's digital microscope. And what appeared shook her entire understanding of 1920s photography. In the window behind the mother, there was a clear reflection of the photographer, but the camera revealed in the glass frame was so modern that it had never existed in that year. And the boy's jacket, under the magnification, his young hands were trying to cover a small metal object attached to the lapel. On it were strange symbols unlike any badge or souvenir seen in that period. And the mother's face, seemingly gentle now, had a clearly forced expression as if she were carrying a heavy secret. Unable to sit still, Sarah picked up the phone and called her close colleague, Professor James Rodriguez, an expert on early 20th century American photography. "James, you have to come right away. I found something that doesn't make any sense." When James appeared, his curious eyes immediately turned to the microscope. His initial skeptical attitude quickly turned to confusion. "That kind of camera. It was more than 15 years away," he whispered. "And look at that light. It's definitely flash technology, which wasn't available until the late 1930s. Sarah nodded, pointing to the metal object on the boy's shirt. "And this? See those markings? They don't match anything I've ever seen." They decided to use the museum's advanced image processing software, hoping to reveal hidden details without damaging the original. While the computer system quietly analyzed the images, Sarah began to trace back history to the Henderson family. Little did she know, that journey would uncover a mystery that had been buried for nearly a century. The donation papers clearly stated that the photo had belonged to Margaret Henderson, who had passed away in 2019 at the age of 97. It was her granddaughter Emily Henderson Walsh who had brought the entire family collection to the museum. In Margaret's handwritten note, the words simply read, "Mother and Thomas, 1925. We must contact Emily Henderson." Walsh, Sarah whispered to James, "If anyone still holds the answer, it is she. I have a feeling. This photo contains a secret that Margaret took to the grave." 2 days later, Emily appeared at the museum. A woman in her 50s, her eyes were kind but tired, her hair streaked with grey. When Sarah placed the enlarged and processed images in front of her, Emily's face paled. "I never knew my grandmother Margaret had this photo." Emily whispered, her eyes fixed on the woman and the boy. "But that's not my grandmother." Sarah and James stared at each other, stunned. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice light as air. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "The woman in the photo, that's my great-grandmother, Helen Henderson. She disappeared in 1925 when my grandmother Margaret was 14. The family always said Helen had run away, but Margaret never believed it. She spent her whole life searching for the truth about her mother." Emily pointed to the boy with a trembling hand. "And that must be Margaret's younger brother Thomas. He disappeared the same day as Helen." The room fell silent. The photo was no longer simply a family keepsake. It could be the last photo capturing two people who had vanished without a trace nearly a century before. Emily continued, her voice low, as if afraid someone might hear. "Margaret always said there was more to it than she could tell. She believed her mother and brother were in danger, but no one would listen. She searched until her last breath. The image processing returned. The metal object in Thomas's hand was clearer than ever. It was a small metal pin etched with strange symbols, a mix of numbers and geometric shapes arranged in a deliberate pattern. James frowned, tracing the engravings on the screen. "This isn't decoration. This is code. Someone wanted to keep information, but hide it." Sarah immediately contacted Dr. Marcus Webb, a cryptologist at Georgetown University, and sent him high-resolution images of the pin. Meanwhile, Emily shared more of her family history. Margaret said her mother Helen had been involved in something important before she disappeared. Helen was a seamstress, but she would stay up late, write letters, and make secret whispering calls. And when Helen and Thomas disappeared, all her personal belongings disappeared with them. Letters, photos, everything. A few hours later, Dr. Webb called back. His voice was filled with excitement on the phone. The symbols on that pin resembled the cryptographic systems used by feminist organizations and the civil rights movement in the 1920s. But this combination, I had never seen it before. It was much more sophisticated than the usual activist codes. It suggested that Helen Henderson was involved in a secret network, perhaps even more dangerous than the family had ever thought. This discovery opened up a whole new avenue. Over the next week, Sarah dove into the archives of women's organizations in Chicago in the 1920s. Although American women had won the right to vote in 1920, there were still underground movements working for civil rights, labor rights, and social justice issues that were fraught with danger. In the archives of the Chicago Historical Society, Sarah came across records of a mysterious organization called the Silent Sisters, a secretive group of women who protected activists and their families from invisible threats. The Silent Sisters, who operated from 1921 to 1927, quietly helped relocate civil rights workers when they were in danger. The women used a complex system of symbols and codes to communicate securely. A silent world few outsiders could imagine. While Sarah and James were immersed in documents, Emily quietly went through her grandmother Margaret's personal belongings. In an old jewelry box behind a velvet lining, she unexpectedly found a small piece of paper. On it, the handwriting was faded but still legible. Helen Henderson, Chicago, 1925. Protection Protocol 7. Thomas safe. When Sarah saw the paper, her heart beat faster. Protection Protocol. The words suggested that Helen and Thomas had not disappeared because they chose to leave, but had perhaps been taken away for their own protection. So that photo wasn't just a family portrait, but perhaps a snapshot of their final moments before they were taken into a secret protection program. The advanced camera reflected in the window now had a plausible explanation. It could have belonged to a law enforcement photographer or even a government agent tasked with documenting the move. Sarah decided to go further. She contacted the National Archives requesting access to previously classified documents from the 1920s. And what she discovered stunned the group. Helen Henderson's name appeared in federal records. She was listed as a key informant on organized crime in Chicago, right in the heat of Prohibition. The documents show that Helen used her sewing business as a cover for her espionage, quietly gathering information about liquor, smuggling rings, and their connections to corrupt officials. Her work was so dangerous that when her identity was nearly exposed in early 1925, the federal government was forced to do something unprecedented: relocate both Helen and her son Thomas to protect them from retaliation. And so the mirror image camera now had a meaning. It was an agent's tool, capturing a piece of evidence. The photograph was the official record of the day. Helen and Thomas entered one of the earliest witness protection programs in American history. Emily was stunned by these revelations. So Margaret was right. Her voice choked, her eyes red. My mother did not abandon the family. She left to protect us. The metal pin that Thomas had hidden in his shirt was now understood to contain a code, coordinates, and contact information, so that one day, if Margaret could crack the code, she could find her mother and brother. But the big question remained. If Helen and Thomas had been successfully relocated, why had Margaret never found them? And why had this photograph been hidden for nearly a century? The answer revealed a heartbreaking truth. The witness protection program of the 1920s was primitive, clumsy, and dangerous. Archives show that Helen and Thomas were taken to a small farming town in Montana under new identities, Helen and Thomas Morrison. For 3 years, they seem to have settled down. Helen became a teacher. Thomas went to school, helped on a nearby farm. They had absolutely no contact with Chicago as the program strictly required. But in 1928, tragedy struck. A massive fire destroyed much of the small town, including the school where Helen taught and the home they shared. Local records are fragmentary, but eyewitness accounts suggest Helen died trying to save her students from the flames. Thomas, then just 15, disappeared after his mother's funeral. Some say he made his way back to Chicago to see his sister Margaret, but never arrived. Others say he was taken in by a farming family in a neighboring state. But no official records confirm this. The agents involved in the relocation were soon reassigned to other assignments. The early witness protection program was abandoned. The files on Helen and Thomas Morrison were classified and eventually forgotten. For the rest of her life, Margaret searched for Helen and Thomas Henderson names that on paper no longer existed. The investigation seemed to be over, but then a surprising twist appeared. In Dr. Webb's hands, the old photograph was once again illuminated, this time under ultraviolet light, a light that had never existed nearly a century before. And there appeared faint, almost invisible lines, as if written to a single person. The clumsy handwriting of a young boy signed, "If you find this, go to the teacher in Big Sky Country. The code will lead you home. TH 1925. Big Sky Country." That name is not unfamiliar. It is the nickname of Montana, a vast, wild land where the sky seems to fall close to the ground. And Thomas, the boy in the photo, left his sister Margaret a clue, a message that in her entire life she had never seen. Have you ever thought how many secrets have been buried just because technology is not enough for people to realize? Sarah and Emily now decided to follow that trail. They traveled to Montana with the help of local historians, where the 1928 fire had taken place. And in the town cemetery, among the small headstones, they found a headstone that read Helen Morrison, beloved teacher, the mother, the woman who had died in the fire, trying to save children from the burning school. But there was no grave for Thomas. Instead, they came across a local legend. In the late 1920s, a lost teenager appeared in the area. He said he was looking for his sister in Chicago. People took him in, and he stayed, choosing a new name, Tom Rivers. Time passed. Tom became a respected man, a teacher like his mother had been. He married, had children, and left a deep mark on the community. And the real turning point came when Sarah and Emily found a photograph from 1950, a man standing among a group of school children. That face, even after 3 decades, Emily recognized immediately. It was the boy in the 1925 photo. The lost brother was still there, just with a different name. The last clue led them to Tom Rivers' family. He had died in 1987, but his son Michael was still alive, keeping the old home on the Montana ranch. Emily picked up the phone with a trembling voice. As he listened to the story, Michael was silent for a long time. Then his voice broke. "My father talked about his sister Margaret all his life. He never stopped hoping that one day she would find him." Michael opened a secret drawer in his father's old desk. There he handed Emily a small box. Inside were letters that had never been sent, family photos, and a detailed explanation of the code engraved on the pin that Thomas had worn. All of it for Margaret, if she ever found it. Can you imagine? A lifetime of writing letters to a loved one, knowing that they would never be sent. Emily gently touched each sheet of paper and understood all their lives. Margaret and Thomas had been searching for each other. They were separated by fate, by circumstances, but their hearts had never stopped missing each other. That old photo which seemed like just a family portrait, eventually revealed a story beyond all expectations, about sacrifice, about family love, and about invisible threads that stretched across space and time. Margaret had passed away just 2 years before this secret was revealed. She never knew that her brother had lived a full life, that her mother had died a hero. But Emily was sure that if her spirit was still around, it would be smiling, because the truth had finally been found. And you listening to this story, have you asked yourself how many old photos are still in silent drawers, still holding secrets that have never been solved?